Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio, your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Howdy, Reverend Laughlin here. We're on the Wise Ones on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. This is my middle show, back to back 3 different shows on Thursday. Please join me anytime you can, live or on archives on YouTube, USA Global TV. It's there and easy to find. When I'm not doing TV shows, I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships, treat a cause, fix a problem, treat symptoms, and you'll always be treating symptoms. And sometimes the cause gets worse. I write about longevity and age-related diseases primarily. Beyond that, I just enjoy life and try to have a good time. I have a brand new book I'm writing now. It's a follow-up to my Longevity Secrets for Healthy Aging I wrote about 5, 6, 8 years ago. And it's called Aging Sucks. I don't have a good subtitle yet. Still working on that. Still working on the cover design. So that'll be coming out here shortly. But I want to have the book ready in June. And I also have a webinar series that's going to go along, that's going to highlight the ground level things that you can do yourself in order to help improve your longevity and the quality of health as you age. That's enough about me. Let's go ahead and jump in. Chase Roe is somebody I met just recently at a military luncheon here in Houston. And in the process of talking, I says, I have a TV show. I'd love to have you come on, and boom, he's here. Things don't happen that quickly, but in this particular case, they did. Chase, please join me up here on stage.
Hi, Red. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it today.
As he said, I met Chase literally less than a month ago. And again, he's an aviator, Apache helicopter pilot, West Point graduate, now involved in finance in the civilian world. We're going to go ahead and get kind of started in the military aspect of things, because the function today on the Wise Ones, the wisdom, the leadership, the lessons learned, those kinds of things. What happens to somebody in the military when the time is up, or they say, I've had it, and now they want to transition into the civilian world? So that's a super important thing, because it's not always something that becomes obvious. So Chase, were you living in Texas when you got the appointment to the West Point?
No, Red. So I actually grew up in North Dakota, in a really, really small town, about 800 or 900 people. And, you know, that's where I got my appointment. And, you know, to be honest, I really didn't have a whole lot of experience with the military. I did have, you know, my grandpa was in for a couple of years, way back in the 50s. And, you know, I had a couple, you know, more distant relatives, but I really didn't have a whole lot of experience. I didn't grow up in a military family. So, you know, I kind of got to just learn about the academy through a friend, and, you know, it kind of piqued my interest. And I had done stuff like, you know, I was in the Boy Scouts and that kind of stuff when I was a kid. So the military kind of appealed to me. And so I thought, hey, I'll throw my hat in and see what happens. And, you know, got lucky enough to get the appointment. And that was in 2002 when I started at West Point.
Congratulations on going there and graduating. I see your major was environmental engineering. Is that a big draw there at the West Point?
Well, West Point is known as an engineering school, and as a matter of fact, everyone does take an engineering track, no matter if you're a language major or if you're an economics major. everyone has to take some sort of engineering track, but I wouldn't say environmental engineering is probably is exactly what it's known for. It's, you know, the civil and the mechanical and the aero are probably the biggest programs there. But yeah, everything academically is centered around engineering in one way or another.
Okay, for those people in our audience, especially those overseas, where exactly is West Point?
So West Point is in New York, about 50 miles north of New York City, on the west bank of the Hudson River. And, you know, for those military history buffs that may be listening, you know, the academy that was established in 1802, and prior to that, you know, it played some, you know, some importance in the Revolutionary War and some strategic significance to where it's situated there on the river. There's a big sharp turn in the river right where the academy is, and you know, it was placed there for some strategic reasons.
Okay, so coming from North Dakota, the weather in New York shouldn't have been much different.
I was at least used to the cold, that's for sure. It probably snowed a little bit more, but you know, the biggest thing for me moving from North Dakota to New York, you know, being that close to New York City, you know, got down there as much as I could, and you know, that was a big adjustment for me. I mean, I loved it. I'd never been to anything like New York City before that, so you know, I'd walk around with my, you know, looking up at the skyscrapers, and I still enjoy visiting New York City.
Okay, you ended up in aviation. Was that a difficult transition out of West Point?
So, you know, the way it works there is when you're a junior, you kind of put in your preferences for which branch of the Army that you'd like to go into, whether it's infantry, artillery, you know, aviation. And at the time, you know, I had had one or two flights on a Black Hawk helicopter during our summer training, and I thought that was really, really neat. You know, so kind of at the time I was thinking either aviation or maybe infantry. But, you know, I ended up, you know, thinking to myself, hey, when else am I going to get a chance to fly helicopters like this? And so I put that as my first choice, got lucky enough to get that. You know, it's kind of based on your academic and military performance and scores and all that. So lucky enough to get my first choice of aviation, and you know, looking back on it, I'm so glad that I did, because I really enjoyed my time. You know, spent about 10 years active duty after I graduated. So you know, right after I got done with West Point, I went straight to Fort Rucker to start flight school.
What was the most difficult thing you found in learning how to fly a helicopter?
Well, you know, I didn't have any aviation experience prior to that either. So, you know, I was really starting at the base level. So, you know, you get in there and you start out with a bunch of classroom stuff. I think the first 2 or 3 months, you know, between aviation medical, aviation, you know, just aviation basics, you know, you kind of start on some of the systems. So it was all new for me, you know, kind of drinking from a fire hose in the classroom. But then, you know, after you get done with that initial portion, then you'd go out and start the practical flight instruction. So we started out on these little trainers. They're Bell 206s, kind of, you know, what you'd see a newscopter. And I mean, once I hit the flight line and took that first flight, I knew, you know, hey, this is something that I'm really going to enjoy. So, you know, the first session is just learning the very basics on how to fly, how to hover, how to take off and land. The hovering was definitely the most challenging part of that basic course. It's, you know, it's really not necessarily an intuitive action. You're using both your hands and both your feet, move in 3 different axes at the same time. So it's kind of funny when you're out there at the stage field watching everyone try to hover for the first time. But, you know, after a week or two, most people seem to get it.
Yeah, most of my experiences in multi-engine turbojet, or turboprop. But my dad worked for Hughes Aircraft back during Vietnam, and they made the OH-6A Cayuse.
Yes.
And so I visited my dad out there, and his boss says, got some time? I said, yeah. So we went out in a couple hours, and we buzzing up and down the hills off the coast of California. Then we came back, and that's, as you say, 2 hands and 2 feet. And we're about 3 feet off the ground, maybe 4 or 5, whatever, but enough that you're in the air and you can see. But it was, during the flight, okay, you take this, you take the little by little. But when I finally got to a hover, then you had to use everything, and that was challenging, and it was it felt okay. I got this, my mind's, but then something else is happening, and so it's the total awareness around you, because all of a sudden things start to, okay, I got to move, foot a little bit this way. So that to me was humbling. Of course, I only did it for a very short period of time, but that Cayuse was a pretty nice little helicopter.
Yeah, and still, certain units still use a variant of it, but yeah, you're exactly right. And the instructors would do the same thing. They'd say, "All right, here, you just take the cyclic stick, and I'll do everything else." So you might do one of the sticks. You're like, "Okay, this isn't too bad. I can go left and right." And then, okay, take the collective, go up and down. That's not bad. But all right, now you've got all the controls, and that's when, just like you said, you really have to be kind of in tune with everything that's going around you. You're always coming in, looking at gauges, looking at readouts and stuff like that. So just like the academic parts, it was pretty overwhelming at first, but everyone kind of, it seems like all of a sudden, maybe 6 to 10 hours in, the switch just kind of flips for a lot of people, and then you're like, okay, I get it now, and you can at least hover so you don't crash. And we got a chance to do, I think maybe within the first 2 or 3 weeks, they did have us solo with another, just us and another flight student. The instructor would step out and say, "All right, I feel like you guys can at least take off and do a traffic pattern and come back and land." So, a couple weeks into it, we were flying all by ourselves. So, and that was a confidence builder. They did that for a reason. They said, "Hey, you guys it's a quick learning curve, but you guys have the skills and the instruction now." So that gives you kind of the ability to move on with the rest of the training.
Yeah, for those people who may not be familiar with the Cayuse OH-6A, Magnum PI TV show used that particular helicopter a lot. I think the early version of Hawaii 5.0, same thing. But anyway, I have 2 questions I usually ask fellow aviators, and it doesn't matter whether you're commercial, Southwest Airlines or whatever, I'll still ask you the same questions. Have you ever been cleared to take off from one airport and cleared to land at another airport in the same breath?
Oh man, not that I can think of. I mean, I spent a lot of time taking off and landing from maybe less common airports. We'd every now and again we'd fly into a major airport if we were going to do take helicopters to be loaded on ships or something. But most of my time was taken off from either Army airfields or combat landing areas.
Yeah. The second question, most people ask, what's the longest flight you've ever been on? I ask the question, what's the shortest?
Well, the shortest, I've definitely taken off and gotten some kind of indication, right after takeoff that, there's some kind of mechanical issue. So I've had a few that have been up and straight back down. But those weren't too common, but we would train for all kinds of, emergency procedures, as I'm sure you did. And, you kind of get those ingrained into your mind by, studying the actual emergency procedures. We did a lot of, simulator time. So the idea is if that ever happens that, it's kind of second nature. You don't have to think about anything. But yeah, there were a few times where, it was a little nerve wracking.
Yeah, when I was at Barbers Point, Hawaii, you listened there on the radio, and they'll say, "You are clear to take off Barbers Point and clear to land Hickam," which is only just literally a couple miles away, more than a couple. But that was a standard, pretty much. You cleared 2 airports at one time for a flight to take off at one and land at another. And so that was but something that you just don't see very often or hear very often.
Right. And I suppose a lot for jets, you're getting there a lot quicker probably than I was in a helicopter.
And then the second one was at rotate, getting ready just to pull the aircraft into the air, fire on one of the engines automatically prompted fire extinguisher, and then turn around and land. So we had a 0.1, the only one I have in my flight book. But aviation is inherently dangerous, and you have to be trained to do it. So that training now gets me into the next area that I want to talk about. How did the military train you to become an effective leader? I mean, sometimes, okay, you're a major, you're in charge, but in reality, from a second lieutenant, first lieutenant, you have to learn on the job, but there's also additional learning. So the military leadership training, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. And you're exactly right. There's a component of on the job. There's a component of, classroom learning, going back for courses that, everyone generally takes at a certain rank. But, I'll say, I guess, just kind of based on where I happen to, the time frame that I happen to have entered the military. Like I said, I started West Point in 2002. The spring of my freshman year is when the invasion of Iraq happened. And that, in Afghanistan as well, that same time period. So by the time I graduated in 2006, we were in the thick of the war. So when I got done with flight school, I got stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and within less than a month of getting to my first duty station out of flight school, I was on a plane for Iraq. So I kind of got thrown into the fire right away. And, looking back on it, I think that was a good thing. And I'm actually grateful for that experience. The unit that I joined, they had already been there for a year. And right before I got there, they got extended for another 3 months. So, I'm coming in, the, bright-eyed new lieutenant, ready to go do all kinds of things. And these guys have already been there for a year, just got extended. So they were all pretty salty. But, it gave me a chance, one, to, get some pretty good flight time right out of the gate. I got progressed and up and flying missions within the first couple of weeks. So I got that experience, which was, invaluable at the time. Some people might go to a stateside assignment and just, you don't get as much flight time stateside. And then, just learning how to interact and lead, even as a brand new lieutenant. Like, I obviously didn't have any combat experience. I barely had any Army experience, but, I got thrown into the position with guys who were, technically subordinate in rank, but, some of these sergeants and some of the other pilots might have had 15, 20 years in the Army. So, that was really a good lesson for me on how to be humble, yet how to be, how to step up and be a leader. So I learned how to take the advice of all my, the experts that were there and formulate an opinion and then ultimately, once I had as much as I could, make a solid decision. So, and I think I still kind of use that today, even, in the corporate world.
Okay, so you came to a point in time, about 10 years in the military, you decided, okay, I want something different. What doesn't matter what the reason is, we're not going to go into that. But you made that decision to leave the Army and to go a corporate job. So we're getting ready here very shortly, in the next few seconds or so, to go to a commercial break. How about when we come back, we talk about the decision you made to get out and why you went a particular route and what has happened since then. So let's go ahead and enjoy the commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Reverend Laughlin here. We're on the Wise Ones on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. My guest today is Chase Roe, former military, Army, West Pointer, and Apache helicopter pilot. Nowadays, financial guru with under Schlumberger. So let's jump back up here on stage, Chase, and let's continue the journey from the military into the civilian world.
Sure. Thanks, Red. Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, I spent about 10 years in the military, and, I really enjoyed my time and loved flying and everything. And I did get to a point though, where I was, started thinking, I'd gotten married, and, my wife and I were starting to think of kids. So, the biggest reason for me, and I'll just, make mention of it. I just kind of wanted to be able to have a little more stability and stay in one place and not move around. So that was kind of at a high level, why I got out. And for those military individuals that may be listening, there's a lot of different reasons people get out, and you probably have a lot of people chirping in your ear one way or another if you should get out or stay. But I just kind of wanted to say, like, hey, it's your decision. It's up to you. You got to do what's best for you, your family, and all that thing. But so that was kind of what prompted me to get out. But as I was thinking about it, I was really thinking, what would be next, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I joined the military through West Point when I was 18 years old, and it's all I had known, all through my 20s up to my early 30s. So, I'm thinking, what's next, and how do I make this transition? And I did kind of realize, like, if I want to get to a certain point, or, enter the business world, I probably need to do a little bit on the front end to kind of make myself more, more marketable, more of an asset to any future company that I may be going into. And, came upon the realization that I was probably lacking some of the skills to do that. So because of that, I started looking at going to business school. And one, like, really, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. So I thought, hey, this would be a good transition. Most business schools, if you go to a full-time program, are 2 years. They're an opportunity not only to build some hard skills, but, to be around people that have been in the business world, learn a lot from peers, gain some of that initial experience. And then from there, it's kind of a good jumping off point. So that was kind of my thought process as I started to apply. And at the time, I was stationed at Fort Drum, which is in upstate New York, north of Syracuse. And so my wife was living with me at the time. She was working, had a job that she'd been at for a couple of years. So I kind of decided, I wanted to either stay in the Northeast, so, she could kind of continue doing what she was doing while I was at school. And then we always kind of had the goal of getting back to Texas. My wife is from Texas originally, so she'd been up there and through enough winters where she said, after this, we got to move to some warmer climate. Yeah, so she endured. Yeah, I think she was up there for 4 or 5 years with me when it was all said and done. But she's like, all right, we're going back to Texas after this. So anyway, I applied to quite a few schools up in the Northeast, and got the opportunity to go to Yale's business school, which is called School of Management. And one thing I always like to tell veterans that are transitioning, it's not an easy path to navigate if you don't have someone that's helping you along. And luckily, I had some good friends, some classmates, some former Army colleagues that had gotten out a year or two before me and had gone through all this. So I was able to kind of lean on them, like, hey, help me sift through the application process, What are the schools really looking for? How do I, write a good essay? How do I, kind of convey my military experience to show that, hey, this will be valuable in the business world too. So that's something that I like to continue to do is speak to anyone who's making that transition, or who's, I talk to a lot of people that are currently in business school, because it's, once you get in, then you have your next transition, which is how do I get a job, and, how do I navigate the application process and the interview process. So, I like to stay involved in that, but yeah, like I said, I had a lot of help, and I think most military guys that have been in, they're really willing to help. So, got accepted, kind of went really straight out. I think I signed out in June for my last day in the Army, and then by mid-August, or signed out in July, and by mid-August I was starting my first classes. And again, like I said, I really, it was kind of like being at flight school again. I was starting from ground zero and really just taking it all in. But like I said, I think learning from my classmates was just as important and helpful than what I did in the classroom. Obviously, Yale is a great school, and I had a lot of really impressive instructors and some really interesting classes that I took. I had a great time there. But the classmates, the classes are about 300 people, and maybe 10% were military backgrounds. So the rest of the people were, from all over different industries, and just picking their brain really kind of helped me understand more about the civilian and the corporate world.
Yeah, some military transition quite easily depending on what their academic background is, and the mere fact that they have 10, 20, 30 years of experience, leadership, in all kinds of environments. But when you're coming out as a relatively mid-grade officer, and you're going in your particular case, you end up here in Houston, the oil and gas industry, which can go up and down in any particular sector depending on what's going on. It's sometimes you catch it on the right phase, and sometimes you don't. But you have the same thing in aviation. You have another, semiconductors. There's just a lot of different cycles that go through those things. But you chose, because you're back here in Texas, because your wife, your family, you chose finance. How did you find that? Because I enjoyed finance more than I enjoyed accounting when I was taking the classes, but it wasn't a subject that I was enamored with.
Yeah, so it took me a little while to kind of sift through the different possibilities and the different industries. Usually the first semester of business school, you're getting all kinds of different companies coming in and doing presentations and talking about their companies and different roles. So I went to every single one of those that I could, just to learn. I didn't know that much about what some of these positions would entail. So I kind of went to everything. And then I had, again, through one of my classmates, introduced me to a couple former Air Force guys that had entered. They were currently working at JP Morgan, and JP Morgan has this great military rotational program called the Military Pathways Program. And so, I started talking to, a couple guys that were currently in the program, and thought it was, a pretty interesting deal. You can go in, and it's a 2-year program, and you can rotate through really anywhere within the bank that, you kind of, they leave it pretty, free and open and flexible. And you basically go around and, talk to people at whatever location that you end up going to, and say, hey, I'm part of this program. Would you be interested in, having me as a rotational candidate? And it's kind of the way they have it set up, it's kind of beneficial for both parties, because, they have another person on their team. Everything's kept separately. You're not taken away from their headcount because you're in the program. And you're basically saying, hey, if you give me a desk to sit at and a little bit of guidance and leadership, I'll come and work on your team for a year. And so I went and applied for that program, and they had an office in Houston. And I thought, hey, this will be pretty interesting. And again, you'll kind of see a theme here. I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do, and I thought this program was another opportunity to explore different functions within the bank. So I got into that program and spent my 2 years, and then came out, got an opportunity to go to a full-time position within the investment bank on a leveraged finance team, which is basically, you're originating loans and bonds, corporate loans and bonds for in my case, primarily oil and gas companies. So, if they need a big chunk of capital to, be able to drill or develop land or whatever, they may have to come and borrow, have debt. And that's what I started off doing at the bank.
Yeah, they have a new TV shows on Netflix, I think, called Landman. Yeah, and
I watch it.
Yeah, a lot of borrowing going back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you know, it's a highly capital intensive industry. But like anything, high capital can mean high returns if you do it correctly.
Yeah, and it can also mean your life is in the sewer for a while too. So
yeah, exactly. There were definitely, there were instances where we were lending to giant, public companies, and they were doing great things, and the next day you might be working through a company that's on the verge of bankruptcy, and they really need a chunk of debt to get them through a cycle. And that was probably one of the most rewarding parts of the banking job was like I said, literally, like a company could be could have been a month away from going bankrupt, and being able to raise the debt and get lenders on board, gave that company a new life. So that, along with, this was really kind of my first on the job experience in finance. So I learned a ton about, how to read financial statements, how to evaluate companies, how to do some modeling, just learning the business lingo. So that was a really good experience, and I stayed in that job for 4 or 5 years. And then in 2023, I got the opportunity to move over to the corporate side with a company that I actually had done some business with. Got to know some of the finance officers within the company. They had an office right here in the Woodlands, which is a suburb north of Houston that I live in. So it was right in my backyard, just the opportunity to move over and see that, and, be closer to home and that kind of thing was a good opportunity for me. And so I moved over and moved into the corporate treasury group for a company called Champion X, who is known as a oil field services company, but a big part of it was we would produce the chemicals that are needed for everything within the production line, and then that was the main thing we did. And then we also did some pumps and drill bits and everything that kind of is needed to supply those companies that do the actual drilling. That's what we did. And so, I moved over there at that point. I was familiar with the company because I worked with them when I was at the bank. And then they made me the manager of their foreign exchange program, which was something I didn't necessarily have direct experience with. It was a little different than what I did at the bank. But again, just another opportunity to jumping into something head first and kind of learn it as I went. And that ended up being really, really interesting as well, because, in that company we had operations all over the globe. So we dealt in 20 or 30 different currencies, and just seeing how that worked, to manage the risk of fluctuating currency rates and doing transactional. I got to do some trading, some currency trading, which was pretty fun. And so, got a good, I was there for about 2 years, and then it was announced that ChampionX was getting acquired by my current company, which is Schlumberger, SLB. And that deal closed last summer in July. And then at that point, that's when I moved over and started with them in my current role, which is the area treasurer for all the Latin American business. So, I came from treasury, and so there was some similarities, but being able to focus on Latin America has been a really, really interesting time too, because there's a lot of, every one of the countries down there has their own regulations and rules and tax considerations and things like that. And then there's still obviously the foreign exchange component that I did previously. But yeah, it's been, just a kind of a nonstop learning curve, which is good for me, so I don't get in a rut.
Well, I think you, like many of us, were in continually learning mode all the time. But we're getting toward the end of the show. I assume that if somebody wanted to chat with you about transitioning, you'd be more than open to help them. How would people reach you? What was your preferred method of contact?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got my LinkedIn page up there. I mean, feel free, anyone, to reach out through LinkedIn. I've also got my email up there. It's just chaseroe at gmail.com. And yeah, Red, I'm happy to, especially the military that are transitioning either from the military or from school or, just new to the civilian world. Like I said, I got so much help from other guys that had done it before me. I really like to continue to do that. So I'm happy to talk. And of course, non-military as well. Like if you're looking for, just want to talk about, corporate world or leadership, happy to share experiences there too.
Okay, for our audio audience, they'll be picking up later on today, Chase.Roe, Chase-Roe, ChaseRoe with a dash in between on LinkedIn, and Chase Lee Roe, ChaseLeeRoe at gmail.com for the audio part down the road. Chase, I really appreciate your time today, and we will catch you later on. And I'm getting ready to close out the show here at my designated time. So take care, Senor, and we will catch you later on. I look forward to our next lunch together.
Thanks, Red. Yeah, let's do another lunch soon.
Okay, take care now. Red O'Laughlin getting ready to close out very, very quickly here. My next show is in about 22 minutes. It's called Talking Heads, and I'll be continuing my series on Aging Sucks. I'm talking more today about some of the pathways of disease and what we can do, and specifically in the area of cancer. So please join me if you can. Red O'Laughlin, and we're closing out this session of The Wise Ones. Take care. Bye, y'all.
Get ready to wear the brand that's changing the world of media. Introducing the official USA Global TV and Radio online store. From our TV show hosts to our incredible global guests, you asked, we delivered. Rep your appearance with pride. Whether you've been on air, hosted a show, or tuned in, we have something just for you. Visit us at usaglobaltvradioshoп.myspreadshop.com and start shopping today. Check back frequently. We're dropping fresh new designs all the time. Showcase your role in our global community. These designs celebrate your voice, your story, your presence. It's more than just merchandise. It's a movement of hope, inspiration, education, and elevated listening. Head to usaglobaltvradioshoп.myspreadshop.com. Your spotlight awaits. USA Global TV and Radio. Elevate your style. Elevate the world.
In a noisy world, true connection begins with listening. Elevated listening transforms every conversation in just 5 simple steps. Pause and breathe. Set your intention. Listen with curiosity. Reflect back. Agree on one next step. Join the Listening Mentor on Let's Finally Talk with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the Listening Mentor, where we help you find inner peace, one conversation at a time. Streaming every day, Let's Finally Talk TV show with Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, only here on USA Global TV and Radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channels to watch and engage with all our content.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honored to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.